You all know about Bigmouth? Well, the creators have made another version of the show for furries, with that being mating season.
Express your anal glands all over my goddamn pelt.
This series follows the antics of 4 animal friends who search for love or try to get laid during mating season. First, there's Josh, a bear whose whole character is that of a pathetic beta male who moves back into his parents' house after his girlfriend dumps him. The bulk of his plots involve his various attempts to get back onto the saddle, with each of them failing in one way or the other. Then there's Ray, the resident quagmire of the cast, who prefers one-night stands over a committed relationship. He gets into some wacky situations, such as getting his wood stuck in a skunk's hole and struggling to get hard after multiple rounds of doing it with a rabbit. Finally, there's Fawn and Penelope, who have similar storylines of pursuing a new partner while still being hung up from their previous serious relationships, with Fawn finding her Mr. Right in a wolf named Dylan, who moves in with her, only for their relationship to fall apart when Dylan refuses to compromise and let go of his wild side that's unsuitable for a domestic lifestyle, which pushes Fawn into dumping him. As for Penelope, she was in a forbidden relationship with a beagle dog named Summer. When her family finds out about this romance, they immediately want to move away out of fear of getting killed by Summer's family and try to forcefully end their relationship. Because of this, Penelope talks Summer into running away together, which proves to be a reckless and rash decision, as it becomes apparent that Summer can't survive in the wild due to being a domesticated pet. Because of this, when she hears her family coming, Summer becomes too afraid to help out Penelope when she is swept away in some rapids and over a waterfall, leaving her heartbroken. And whoa! Both of these heartbreaks lead to Fawn and Penelope meeting each other and becoming best friends. It's funny how Josh seemed to be set up as the main character of mating season in both the advertising and the first episode, but soon he falls into the role of supporting character, with most plots centering on him being nothing but filler. If anything, Fawn and Penelope feel more like the main characters of the series, as their respective backstories lead into plots that have more narrative significance. For example, the final 2 episodes revolve around Fawn reuniting with Dylan and becoming bitter over him having a fiance. But whoa! Their feelings for each other reignite, and so the 2 of them have an affair. And while all of this is happening, Penelope finally gets a new girlfriend. But uh-oh! Summer has found her way to her, and now she's in a love triangle. But I am getting ahead of myself here, so let's talk about the show itself. Right off the bat, I gotta say, mating season is probably one of the most boring shows I have ever watched. Each episode just drones on at an excruciating pace. The biggest contributing factor to this issue is the dialogue. It's written in a style that's supposed to be awkward, yet naturalistic. That's actually fairly common within comedy shows in recent years. However, the problem is that the writing in mating season lacks any real wit, resulting in the conversations between the characters coming across as extremely dull. The characters simply stating what is specifically going on with a monotone cadence is not entertaining in of itself.
I feel like everyone here hates me.
Of course they hate you. These are Carson's loved ones and you killed him.
Really weird that you came.
Should I leave?
In the middle of the funeral?
That's even worse.
And just to be absolutely clear, you were gonna dump my body in the river and not tell anyone.
I was gonna stuff rocks in your mouth so you'd sink to the bottom.
Yeah, so I'd sink to the bottom. Sure, yes.
Now, there have been some takes here and there on social media about how this show has a genuine heart to it, and has an interesting exploration of different types of relationships. Well, an attempt was certainly made, and I guess it's commendable that the writers tried to do so, instead of having the series be nothing more than simple trash. However, the heartfelt moments just end up coming across as hollow, due to the flat writing that does the bare minimum. The conversations about different types of relationships, and people exploring them in order to find which one suits them best, ultimately comes across as surface level.
I still can't believe Connor was married.
I guess monogamy sucks too, huh?
Yeah, there's no good way to do this.
Plus, it seems that the show can't decide whether it wants certain moments to be sincere or be made into a joke. And neither of these two different tones balance together in harmony or work well on their own. One example of the show's disingenuous attempts at being heartwarming is this one part where Ray's mom comes to town to throw him a birthday party. That's several months late, when Josh tries to remind Ray how neglectful she was to him throughout his childhood. He gets defensive of her and lashes out. Later, Josh tells his mom about the situation, and she points out how Ray wants to believe that his mother truly does love him, and thus is willing to accept any sort of kind gesture, regardless of how meaningless it is. But then, the episode takes a bizarre direction, when it is revealed that the party Ray's mom threw for him was just part of a scheme to steal his belongings, in order to sell them off and pay her debts. However, Ray immediately forgives his mom, and still considers the sham of a birthday party as proof she truly does care for him. Now, this resolution might have worked if it was portrayed as a comedic twist on a corny happy ending to a sitcom episode. But instead, the scene is unironically framed as a genuinely heartwarming reconciliation between Ray and his mom, which feels completely unearned, since all she did was reinforce how much of a horrible mother she is. There are several plots involving the characters developing serious romantic relationships. However, it is hard to get invested in any of these storylines, due to the chemistry between these characters being completely non-existent, which makes them hardly any different to the relationships that are solely meant to be comedic. The only plotline I thought worked decently involves this moose named Seek, a side character who only appears in 2 episodes, and yet he has hands down the best story out of everyone in the entire cast. He starts off as one of Fawn's suitors, who struggles to make a move on her, and so goes to buck antlers with another moose in order to gain the courage to do so. But after having some chemistry with his opponent, he discovers that he's gay, which was the real reason he couldn't make a move on Fawn. And his story doesn't just stop right after coming out of the closet, as in the next episode, it's established that things didn't work out between Zeke and the other moose he sparred with, due to his inexperience, and he is advised to have casual sex with other men. However, Zeke is uncomfortable with the idea of doing it with total strangers, which is reinforced after an encounter with a guy whom he tries to hook up with at a gay bar, who was way too forward. But later on in the episode, he meets someone who is willing to get to know him, while having a no strings attached relationship. While it's not the greatest storyline in the world, it's also the only one in the entire show that felt like it had some genuine sincerity to it, even if it's not much. Plus, it contains the only joke in the series that was actually almost funny.
You're a baby gay!
What does that even mean?
It means that you're fresh out of the closet. Get out there, get laid!
But you just said I'm a baby, that's wrong!
Oh, and speaking of jokes, just about all of them in this series are either lazy or horrendously awful, which is kind of a big issue for a show that is supposed to be a comedy. That is because most of the jokes are not really jokes, but rather statements made with a quasi-comedic delivery. This is also yet another bottom-tier adult comedy, where the jokes have obnoxiously obvious setups, where the punchline is just sex, drugs, and swears, thanks to the misconception that these things are funny in of itself, which ironically makes the show come across as juvenile, and the childish humor doesn't end there. Look, there's pee! Lap. Look, there's poop. Lap. Look, there's butts! Are you laughing yet? While these also gross out jokes were prominent in Bigmouth, and that show was a big hit, it also was the exception to the rule, as countless other adult animated shows in recent years that took the same lazy approach to humor ended up flopping hard and became instantly forgotten about. Maybe Mating Season will get some success by default due to the name power of Bigmouth, but much like the latter, it'll never have a shining reputation, regardless of how popular it becomes. At this point, I'm not even mad at these sorts of crass jokes, as I become numb to them, due to being overused in adult animation, and a lack of creativity has made me feel dead inside. And of course, since the cats are animals, the audience has to be constantly reminded of what kind of animals they are, along with the specific traits of said animals, because that's funny. There are also jokes about famous anthro characters, such as Mickey Mouse, who are actually real-life celebrities in this world, but none of them are clever or funny, as they're mostly just about them getting cancelled, or doing drugs.
Which famous canine was cancelled?
Oh, Snoopy! Correct! Yes!
Oh, are we not allowed to like Snoopy anymore?
I'm sorry, mating season, but a random reference alone isn't a joke.
There's like a million of them.
And they all have COVID.
Of course.
Really? They did a COVID joke in 2026. Alright, it is time to discuss the other major aspect of mating season that had already made it so infamous. That being the art style and animation. Now this series had the easiest built-in audience, that being the furry community, given the premise of animals wanting to bone each other, along with the heavy emphasis on fetishes. However, there is one major problem. Unlike several of the most popular anthro characters in media, such as Loa Bunny, Crystal, Luna and Diane Foxian, just to name a few, who are universally celebrated for their beautiful appearances, the designs of the characters in mating season are hideous and bland, the line work and facial expressions are ugly, and the colors are puke-inducing. Plus, mating season being made by the creators of Bigmouth isn't an excuse, as a smut show like this, that's all about pandering to audiences using sex appeal, heavily relies on having characters who are at least appealing to look at. I doubt even the biggest degenerates from DeviantArt would want to have a piece of this show's cast. I guarantee that you could select literally any furry artist online to redesign these characters, and they will 100% come up with something better. Heck, many of them already did. There are infrequent moments of beautiful lighting and scenery that have gotten praise on social media, but unfortunately, they clash poorly with the bad character designs. It's kind of a shame, because it ultimately shows that there is some potentially good talent working on this show, and yet there seems to be an insistence on using awful art direction, because that's what Bigmouth had, and that series was a success, so they feel they have to do the same for mating season. Aside from the art style, the actual animation is also pretty awful, as it's incredibly stiff and choppy, and there are several animation cycles that are just embarrassing to watch. The show might have fared a little better if a more minimalist approach was taken with the animation direction, but instead, there are plenty of scenes where it insists on being hyper-expressive, with an emphasis on visual spectacle, which backfires horribly. One prime example of this is a fight scene that attempts to be a Looney Tunes homage for some reason. However, there isn't enough cartoony exaggeration for it to work. I don't know, maybe if mating season wasn't overly ambitious with its animation, had more appealing character designs, and had put more effort into the writing, it might have turned out much better. But instead, it seemed too content with being a crass comedy, and not even a good one. And that was my review on mating season. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it. Anyway, see ya!